course, in the day after, we got some very interesting slides that emerged by way of a WNBA owners leak. And look, I don't believe that they just put it out there. They turned it over to ESPN. It got put out, and it was because, hey, the owners understand that there's a large section of sports fans that are on the side of the owners.
That brief pause, that moment of hesitation, reveals far more than any official statement ever could. 6 full weeks passed with absolute silence from the WNBA owners. No counteroffers, no public engagement, no visible urgency. Then, without warning, a detailed proposal suddenly appeared through a leak to ESPN, complete with salary figures and revenue-sharing structures. This was not a coincidence, and it certainly was not accidental. It was a calculated maneuver in what is rapidly becoming one of the most contentious labor negotiations in the history of women's professional sports. The timing alone makes that clear. The leak surfaced immediately after reports emerged that several players failed to attend a critical collective bargaining agreement meeting earlier in the week. In labor negotiations, attendance is not symbolic, it is leverage. When key participants do not show up, it signals internal disagreement, fatigue, or a breakdown in unity. The owners noticed this, and they responded not with private discussion, but with a public narrative shift. Leaking the proposal to a major media outlet served multiple purposes at once. First, it allowed ownership to frame itself as proactive and generous, positioning the league as willing to dramatically increase compensation. Second, it placed pressure on the players' union by exposing the numbers directly to fans, sponsors, and the broader sports world. Once the public sees figures like multi-million-dollar maximum salaries, the optics change. The question shifts from are players being underpaid to why isn't this deal good enough? This is a classic negotiation tactic. When private talks stall, one side appeals to public opinion to regain leverage. But doing so also escalates tension. It transforms a closed-door financial discussion into a reputational battle, where both sides risk alienating supporters. What makes this moment especially volatile is that it arrives at the height of the league's visibility. The WNBA is no longer negotiating in obscurity. Every move is amplified, dissected, and debated in real time. Silence is interpreted as strategy. Leaks are seen as power plays. And hesitation is viewed as instability. The owner's decision to break 6 weeks of silence with a media leak rather than a formal joint statement suggests that trust between the two sides has eroded significantly. When negotiations reach this stage, compromise becomes harder, not easier. Each action is interpreted through the lens of suspicion. This is no longer a routine labor discussion. It is a battle over control of the narrative, over who appears reasonable and who appears obstructive. And once negotiations enter that phase, the risk of escalation rises dramatically.
We're trying to address in the CBA. And of course, it had been 6 long weeks. It was a 6 long week winter. There was snow, there was ice, until they finally got a new proposal from the WNBA owners. Well, that proposal came late last night. It came last night from
The calendar is now working against everyone involved. The WNBA season is scheduled to begin on May 8th. Before a single game can be played, the league must conduct an expansion draft, free agency, and a rookie draft. None of these processes can move forward without a finalized CBA. Union leadership has expressed confidence that games will be played in 2025. But the wording matters. Saying games will be played is not the same as guaranteeing a full season. A shortened schedule, limited participation, or delayed start would still technically fulfill that statement while undermining the league's momentum. A season consisting of 20 games instead of a full slate would not simply be disappointing. It would be a public relations disaster. Fans, sponsors, and broadcasters expect continuity, especially after last season's surge in popularity. Anything less than a full, competitive season risks eroding trust. History shows that leagues rarely recover quickly from disrupted seasons, especially when they are still establishing their market position. The WNBA does not yet have the margin for error enjoyed by older leagues. The stakes extend beyond contracts and calendars. Approximately 3/4 of WNBA fans tuned in last season specifically to watch Caitlin Clark. Her rookie year drove unprecedented interest, despite the physical demands placed on her and the injuries that caused her to miss 13 games. Fans have made their expectations clear. They want to see a full season. They want consistency. They do not want a compromised product just as the league's profile is rising. Momentum in sports is fragile. Once lost, it is difficult to rebuild. The league has spent years working toward this moment. Now, internal conflict threatens to undo that progress.
from like 1.81 or 1.87 million in the final year of the CBA up to 2.4 for the max salary, and it escalated salaries up to $1 million for the average player by the end of the next CBA. Was that the new proposal? Or is this a new one? Is this one we haven't got the details of yet? I'm sure the Players Union is going to
At this stage, what makes the situation even more fragile is not just the money on the table, but the psychological standoff that has formed between the two sides. Negotiations like this often fail not because a deal is impossible, but because neither side wants to be seen as the one that blinked first. In the WNBA's case, that tension is amplified by timing, visibility, and fear of long-term consequences. From the player's perspective, this moment feels historic. For the first time, the league is experiencing mainstream attention, sold-out arenas, record-breaking television ratings, and cultural relevance driven by new stars. Many players believe that if they do not secure structural revenue sharing now, they may never get another chance. Growth windows in sports do not stay open forever, and players are acutely aware that popularity can fade as quickly as it arrives. To them, accepting higher salaries without tying pay directly to revenue feels like settling for short-term comfort at the cost of long-term fairness. On the other side, owners are staring at balance sheets that remain deeply negative. Even with improved ratings and attendance, most franchises are still losing money. Investments in facilities, travel, staffing, and marketing are being made in anticipation of future returns, not current profits. Owners worry that committing to gross revenue sharing could lock the league into financial obligations it cannot sustain if growth slows or media deals underperform. From their perspective, caution is not greed, it is survival. What complicates matters further is the role of public perception. Fans overwhelmingly support players, but public opinion can shift quickly when large salary numbers are introduced without context. A $2.4 million maximum salary sounds enormous to casual observers, especially when compared to historical WNBA pay. Owners know this, which is why the leak to ESPN was so effective. It reframed the debate in the public eye, even if it did little to move negotiations forward privately. The danger now is escalation. If talks break down completely, both sides risk losing something they cannot easily regain. Players risk losing momentum, visibility, and bargaining power if a season is delayed or cancelled. Owners risk damaging the league's credibility at the exact moment it is beginning to matter in the broader sports landscape. This is the point where leadership matters most. Compromise does not mean surrender, it means recognizing that growth requires trust on both sides. If that trust cannot be rebuilt soon, the cost will not just be financial. It will be emotional, cultural, and potentially irreversible for a league still fighting to define its future.
Only going to play 20 games, then forget it. Just close the whole thing down. That's not what fans want after watching. Number one, look, 3/4 of all fans are tuning in for Caitlin Clark. And after seeing her have to deal with the injuries and everything and only seeing 13 games last year, nobody wants to see 20 games from this league. We want to see every game.
The numbers at the center of this dispute are undeniably striking. According to the leaked proposal, WNBA owners are offering to raise the maximum player salary from approximately $1.87 million in the final year of the current CBA to $2.4 million under the next agreement. Average player salaries, under this structure, would climb to around $1 million by the end of the new deal. For a league that has never consistently turned a profit, these figures represent a historic financial shift. On the surface, this appears transformational. For decades, players have argued that their compensation did not reflect their contribution to the league's growth. Now, ownership is proposing salary levels that rival those of established professional leagues. This is not a marginal increase. It is a fundamental restructuring of pay. However, the players' union is not focused primarily on salary caps or averages. Their demand centers on revenue sharing, specifically a claim to 30% of gross revenue. Not net revenue after expenses, but gross revenue taken directly from the top line before costs are deducted. This distinction is crucial. Gross revenue includes all income generated by the league before accounting for expenses such as travel, facilities, staffing, marketing, and infrastructure. From the player's perspective, gross revenue sharing ensures transparency and prevents accounting practices that could minimize their share. It also ties their compensation directly to the league's success. From the owner's perspective, however, this demand is deeply problematic. Gross revenue sharing ignores the reality of operating costs in a league that is still heavily subsidized. Charter flights, upgraded training facilities, enhanced medical care, and improved accommodations all come at significant expense. Owners argue that sharing revenue before covering these costs would place teams at financial risk. The conflict, therefore, is not about whether players deserve to earn more. Both sides agree on that point. The disagreement lies in how financial risk is distributed. Players want protection against manipulation and stagnation. Owners want protection against insolvency. What makes this standoff particularly dangerous is that both positions are internally consistent but mutually incompatible. There is no easy middle ground between fixed salary increases and percentage-based gross revenue sharing. One model prioritizes stability, the other prioritizes equity tied to growth. This is why negotiations have stalled. The issue is not money alone. It is structure, philosophy, and control.
To begin May 8th, but an expansion draft, free agency, and rookie draft also need to happen before the league tips off. Agumake said once the revenue sharing is solved, the rest hopefully will fall into place. Quote, we made the point that once we nail.
What often gets overlooked in labor disputes like this is how quickly opportunity can turn into fragility. The WNBA's recent surge did not come from decades of steady dominance, it came from a perfect storm of timing, personalities, media attention, and cultural momentum. Those conditions are powerful, but they are also temporary. If this moment is mishandled, the league may discover that rebuilding trust and excitement is far harder than generating it in the first place. Players understand this risk, but they interpret it differently than ownership. Many believe that a short-term sacrifice, even a delayed or shortened season, could be worth it if it leads to a fairer system for the next generation. They see themselves as guardians of the league's future, not just participants in the present. From that perspective, standing firm on revenue sharing becomes a moral stance rather than a financial one. Giving in now could mean locking future players into a structure that never truly reflects the league's value. Owners, however, see a different danger. They know sponsors, broadcasters, and casual fans have limited patience. Momentum in sports is fragile, and once audiences drift away, it is incredibly difficult to bring them back. A disrupted season risks signaling instability to partners who are only just beginning to take the league seriously. For owners, stability is the currency that allows growth to continue, and any hint of chaos threatens years of investment. There is also the issue of precedent. If the league agrees to gross revenue sharing now, it could set a standard that affects future expansion teams, media negotiations, and long-term budgeting. What looks manageable during a growth spike may become unworkable if revenues plateau. This uncertainty makes owners cautious, even when they acknowledge the players' role in driving the league forward. Caught in the middle are the fans, whose enthusiasm has fueled much of this progress. They are not thinking in terms of gross versus net revenue. They are thinking about opening night, rivalries, storylines, and stars they want to watch. Every day of uncertainty erodes that emotional investment. Ultimately, this dispute is less about numbers and more about vision. It is a clash between two ideas of what the WNBA should become and how quickly it can get there. If both sides fail to recognize that they are working toward the same long-term goal, this moment of unprecedented growth could quietly slip away, leaving behind only questions about what might have been.